All right, people, you guys are watching and or listening to another Nomadic Cole video for your guys' education and or entertainment. So be sure you guys leave a like, leave a comment, share, and of course subscribe for more epic, awesome, cool, and interesting content just like this one right here, right now on the Nomadic Cole YouTube channel, guys. Guys, tonight, as some of y'all may already know, we are going to debunk the claims and attacks from the thorn in my side named Dexter Midnight. I'll cite my sources and we'll get into the nitty gritty of some of the most common talking points used by Dexter and the Zionists, and we'll debunk them one by one. So grab your popcorn, take a seat, as we shed some light onto Dexter Midnight. Now let me cook and let's get this barbecue started, shall we? Let's get this thing started. All right, guys. So first of all, guys, the first claim that I saw when I looked in his little post, his little ramblings on his post, was about LGBT. So I do have a hunch that Dexter's main reason for his support for the Israeli state is that they're the only country in the Middle East that supports the LGBTQ community. After all, Dexter Midnight is a gay fox persona, so it makes sense that he'd support the LGBT. And hey, I support the gay rights as well. Don't get me wrong. And while that may be true in some sense, is a culture war issue really a good reason to start another forever war in the Middle East? I don't think so. Personally, I just think that's geopolitically unsound reasoning. Secondly, are these arguments about women's rights and LGBT rights in the Middle East coming from a good faith, honest argument? I have good reason to think not. A lot of these Fox News and Daily Wire hosts who are so quick in weaponizing rhetoric about the LGBT and women's rights in the Middle East to try and outleft the left or claim a moral high ground are more often than not opposed to these same rights here at home. The second claim I'll take on is the claim that Israel is the quote-unquote only democracy in the Middle East. This statement is actually false. There are several democracies in the Middle East with varying levels of functionality. For starters, Cyprus, for example, is a democracy. So is Lebanon, Tunisia, and Kuwait, one of our Gulf state allies. Technically, Iraq and Egypt, at least in theory, are also democracies as well. However, their elections are often corrupt. This claim is so common, and yet it's so easily debunked by simply Google searching for democracy in the Middle East and doing less than 5 to 10 minutes of research. Pretty interesting, right? The third claim I'll take on is that Israel is fighting a war on terror. Many Zionists often claim we must support Israel in order to combat terrorism in the Middle East, specifically Iranian-backed groups like the Houthis and Hezbollah. However, when we look at the bigger picture, a strong argument could be made that the Israeli government is actually the largest contributor to violence and terror throughout the region. For starters, according to Middle East Eye, an independent news source reporting on conflicts throughout the Middle East, they report Israel has bombed 8 sovereign nations in the Middle East. Those countries include, and are not limited to, Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Tunisia, Iran, and even our Gulf state ally Qatar. All countries bombed in just 3 years. This has only increased hostilities and increased tensions between nations in the region. Also, during Operation Timber Sycamore, Israel, in collaboration with the CIA, backed ISIS terrorists, providing both arms and aid to them in an effort to balkanize Syria, destabilize the region, and stir up regime change against the Assad dictatorship, which ultimately backfired and culminated in the recent takeover of Syria by Al Qaeda, resulting in the deaths of thousands of innocent Orthodox Christians, Kurds, and even Sunni and Shia Muslims. And if that weren't bad enough, Bibi Netanyahu enabled his now arch nemesis, the Hamas, by giving them suitcases full of millions of dollars in cold hard cash. This isn't a conspiracy, folks. Rather, it's even confirmed by the Israeli media, sources like Haaretz. According to Netanyahu's own words on live national television to his own far-right extremist Likud party members, he says, quote, "We need to fund Hamas in order to separate the Palestinians in the West Bank from the ones in Gaza in order to thwart the creation of a Palestinian state." So, makes you beg the question, is our supposed greatest ally, Israel, might they actually be the baddies? Quite possibly. The fourth claim I'll take on is that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. Ah, yes, the classic false equivocation fallacy. In order to have this debate, we need to define our terms. Firstly, what is Zionism? Dexter often defaults to the simpleton's answer of, it's just support for a Jewish state. However, it's a lot deeper than that. Zionism is actually a political ideology created in the 1800s by Europeans saying that European Jewish diaspora need to leave Europe and return home. Prior to the establishment of the state in Israel in 1948, Orthodox Christians, Catholics, Semitic Jews, and Arabs that lived there since the time of the Ottoman Empire lived in a state of relative peace. And after 1948, thanks to the ideology of Zionism, the British divided the borders into separate states and began sending tens of thousands of European Jews to Israel in order to colonize the country in accordance with the infamous dictator from World War II, Mr. H. Mustache Mann's Havara Agreement, an agreement made between the Nazis, Zionist ideologues, and the British imperialists to deport Jews out of Europe and into the Middle East. The British would argue that the Israeli state was actually a reparation for the Jews because of the Holocaust. However, it is clear, according to the Havara Agreement, that this was actually more so a voluntary mass deportation rather than a reward for being persecuted during the Second World War. Secondly, what is anti-Semitism? The most accurate answer, I would say, would be the hatred of religious and ethnic Jews based solely on race. If we agree to those terms, then by definition, I'm not an anti-Semite. I have several Jewish friends, many of whom told me about the corruption in Netanyahu and the danger of his far-right radical extremist Likud party. They also told me about the real-world consequences of America's constant failed intervention in the Middle East. There are many Jews who oppose Zionism. Just look at the Orthodox Jews protesting in favor of peace with the Palestinians. I stand with them. Therefore, I am an anti-Zionist and not an anti-Semite. Next is probably one of the biggest questions we'll get around to tonight. Is the Israel-Palestine conflict a war or a genocide? Now, here's the part where me and Dexter, if we were debating, would likely have a spirited debate about whether or not we call the violence a war or a genocide. For certain, I'd make the argument that this is a genocide. I'll provide several sources to back up my points. Israel First commentators like Dexter often use October 7th the insurgency by Hamas as a justification for mass violence against the Palestinians. However, that was 3 years ago. Hamas killed at most a little over 1,000 people and took dozens of hostages. Terrible? Yes. However, the violence is now heavily one sided. According to Brown University, Nature magazine, The Lancet, the UN, and the International Court of Justice and World Court, they estimate that the Palestinian death toll is between 71,000 and 80,000 dead. Tens of thousands more are injured, displaced, or missing, totaling a max estimate of around 100,000 plus casualties, with 98% of all Gazan infrastructure destroyed. Every hour, an average of one child dies in Gaza, totaling 24 children killed per day. Now, 1,200 casualties caused by a small minority guerrilla militia force created by Netanyahu himself through his own funding, compared to 100,000 casualties caused by the modern day military backed by the U.S. military industrial complex, the IDF, doesn't seem a little overkill to you? That's an extremely disproportionate amount of carnage, if you ask me. The war crimes are so obvious that even AIPAC bought and paid for news outlet Fox News' local channel, Fox Phoenix, showed that Red Crescent first responders traveling to a bombed village to provide aid to civilians were gunned down in cold blood by the IDF. Israel tried to claim that this was a mistake because, quote, they were snuck up on by unmarked vehicles without hazard lights or emergency flashers. However, the dash cam footage that was released showed the exact opposite story. The Red Crescent ambulances were clearly marked, had their sirens, flashers, and hazard lights on, and were traveling in a convoy before being ambushed. And when the Israelis couldn't lie their way out of it, they literally tried to bury the story in evidence by bulldozing the emergency vehicles over and dumping the bodies and vehicles into a mass unmarked grave in the middle of the desert. I've also seen videos of Red Crescent responders being hit with drone strikes. Reporters who tried to enter Gaza to investigate what the heck is going on here have been killed on several occasions. The IDF has killed unarmed men, women, children, the elderly, even babies. Don't believe me? You don't have to take my word for it. Take the word of former Special Forces operator Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Aguilar, who shortly after retiring from the military was hired by the Gaza Humanitarian Fund to work as a security force officer at the only 4 distribution stations in Gaza. He later resigned from his position because he became a whistleblower after reporting, documenting, and witnessing firsthand the cruelty, racism, war crimes, and violence against women and children, as well as starvation conditions in Gaza. The genocide is so clearly obvious to the overwhelming majority of people worldwide that even moderate commentators like Piers Morgan and Joe Rogan have been forced to admit that the violence in Gaza is a genocide. So who's your force? Who's your source for these claims of Israel being, quote, the most moral army in the world, huh? Ben Shapiro, a smart aleck speed rambling podcaster with an obvious bias? Or is it Mark Levin, a fear-mongering faux news host who's never served his country in any capacity? Or maybe Lindsey Graham, a senator, an inside trader who's been taking millions in bribes and dirty money from the military industrial complex and APAC, and thus has never seen a war that he doesn't like. Sorry, people, had some temporary technical difficulties. Coming back to the video now. Or maybe, just maybe, Dexter, maybe it's your favorite pedophile in chief, President Trump, who you seem to have a strange fetish for. He doesn't even have the respect or courtesy to take his cap off for the troops who died in the war that he started. Give me a break. Should we really fight a war in Iran? And why? Dexter, you've claimed to be a libertarian. Well, that's just great. I am too. I'm a bona fide, card carrying, dues paying member of the Libertarian Party. And I'm here to tell you that by supporting a genocide, an interventionist forever war in the Middle East, you are in direct violation of the non aggression principle of the Libertarian Party, which strictly prohibits the use and initiation of force and or violence as a means to achieve political goals. Libertarians also strongly believe in the foreign policy positions of Dr. Ron Paul, who is a staunch anti-interventionist. Therefore, sir, you are not a libertarian, and if you support these conflicts, you, sir, have a conflict of interest. You advocate for American tax dollars to be used to send our troops, my friends and family members, by the way, who serve in the armed forces, to die in order to support another regime change war in the region where we've repeatedly fucked it up without congressional approval, might I add. You repeat the same tired, old, worn out talking points of neocons and Netanyahu who lied to us about WMDs in Iraq in 2003. We killed 1 million Iraqis. 4,500 soldiers died. Tens of thousands more returned home injured and or mentally scarred with PTSD, and we can't even afford to take care of them and help them with the help that they need at the VA because we're too busy sending $38 billion to your favorite country, Israel. Netanyahu has been saying Iran is weeks away from getting a nuclear missile for the last 33 years. And yet you still believe him? Even after former Congresswoman, current Director of National Intelligence, and Lieutenant Colonel Tulsi Gabbard announced to Congress that her intel proved that Iran was compliant with IAEA inspections and was not building a nuclear weapon. That doesn't make any sense, man. And yet you have the audacity, Skip, to call me an anti-American? I'm one of the most patriotic dudes around. Almost my entire family serves or has served honorably in the armed forces. And as for me, I served my community proudly by bearing the thin red line and volunteering to fight the fires on the home front, and I would gladly do it again. So, yeah, it's false equivalence fallacy to assume that I'm somehow, quote unquote, pro Iranian because I stand on principles, learn from history, and advocate for peace. As my good friend Rexus Prime once said, war isn't black or white, it's morally gray. And I agree, especially when it comes to this new war started by our supposed no new wars president. The only excuse for this forever war is actually just religious psychosis. And considering that last I checked, you're an atheist, I highly doubt you'd have a good reason to believe Trump's wild claim that he's somehow anointed by Jesus to bring about the end times prophecy, right? The same Bible thumpers you once criticized on my podcast for not letting you be a gay Fox persona are also supporting this very war. So whose side are you on here? I will not stand idly by and let you slander my character without consequences because you think that you have a point to prove. You and your pride and your ego just can't admit to being wrong, can you? Well, unlike you, I can admit when I'm wrong. And if you have a legitimate response, I'd be willing to hear it out. Perhaps none of the reasons I listed above are why you support this war. Perhaps you're just grifting or LARPing for the free clout. That would just make you a lol cow now, wouldn't it? Or mayhaps your intentions are even more nefarious. Mayhaps, as a lot of your content suggests, you have a strange fetish for Donald Trump and his neocon fanboys, eh? Mayhaps you would have loved to take a trip with Dirty Don on the Lolita Express. Well, let's face the facts, bud. He's not going to let you hit. Because the files show that unless your name's Bubba Clinton, then he likes him underage. So, mayhaps you'd like to hang out with that deviant baboon named Rabbi Shmuley and his daughter in Tel Aviv while you try to suction cup their dildos to your nose while you act like some sort of weird perverted clown. Or mayhaps you'd really like to take a peek at Lindsey Graham's infamous ladybugs. Don't look that one up on Google. Oh boy. Lord knows what strange things go on up in that little noggin of yours. But the fact is, you're clearly a mark for these sick freaks. And it's about damn time someone put you in your place. Oh, and by the way, one more thing, Dexty boy. Say hi to your future governor, James Fishback, for me. Yeah. Anyways, thank you guys for tuning in and watching. This is the Nomadic Cole, signing off.